The extraterrestrial ships stealthily descended, hovering over the Earth with their sleek metallic hulls glistening in the sunlight. Dense, sprawling woodlands, their scanners looking down at the canopy with what can only be termed as contempt. Detected no indications of sophisticated life, no organized cities, and no technology that presented a risk because, to them, the verdant expanse was only a resource deposit. Aliens who are primed for harvesting and exploitation broadcast their discoveries back to their home planet. Making fun of Earth's so-called defenders, they said that the absence of obvious opposition constituted evidence of weakness. Their evaluation was quick and icy, and the trees were devoid of anything significant. In their conceit, they thought fit to instantly dispatch extraction forces to gather resources for their expanding empire. When the initial wave of extraterrestrial forces came, the Earth's forests were seen as a location of opportunity rather than a battlefield. Setting up advanced bases in the middle of the jungle with accuracy contrasted sharply with the surroundings, including gleaming panels that buzzed with towering machines started to clear trees, breaking apart the landscape with eerie blue light. Drones hovered overhead, scanning the ground, cataloging resources, and disregarding the life it supported. Looking for dangers, and their reports support the alien commander's theories. Everything was going as planned, with no indications of organized resistance. As the days went by, the forests themselves appeared to change, turning what had been a steady, predictable setting into the dense canopy made it harder and harder to traverse the distorted signaling equipment. Malfunctioned and drones abruptly vanished. Sending patrols farther into when the jungle failed to return, the aliens initially ascribed these events to the strange landscape and the planet's turbulent environments. They modified their procedures and dispatched more sizable patrols that were well-armed and outfitted with thermal scanners. But the irregularities continued, and survivors began to report them. Whispers of shadowy figures moving between the trees, disappearing as soon as they emerged, and shrewdly describing traps. The alien soldiers started to feel uneasy because, camouflaged, they were indistinguishable from the surroundings. Couldn't describe a basic fear they hadn't experienced while conquering other worlds where they were being observed. At night, odd sounds reverberated across the forest as branches snapped in intentional rhythmic patterns. Occasionally, alien equipment would operate on its own, attracting troops, while the rustle of leaves conveyed a sense of intent. The invaders became cautious due to false alerts, but their superiors disregarded these as they underestimated their opponent in the jungle's trickery, and soon after, the disappearances progressed. Whole squads disappeared without firing a shot, and their remains were discovered. Days later, the aliens were almost ritualistically put, covered in mud and leaves. Started to believe a power was actively working against them after seeing brief peeks in CCTV film, little more than vague forms that mix in perfectly with the environment. Yet the accuracy of the strikes made it clear that this was not haphazard opposition, rather, it was planned. In search of answers, organized extraterrestrial commanders sent out their top reconnaissance squads. These elite groups were equipped with cutting-edge tracking equipment that could determine the cellular composition of biological forms. Nevertheless, the rainforest only provided aggravation, and the heat signatures they found blended in flawlessly with the local wildlife in the bush, with no footprints or tracks left by the enemy. The aliens started to doubt the effectiveness of their strategies after swallowing every proof of their movements. In strategic areas, they increased their numbers by twofold, deploying armored walkers and specialized drones with flame-based weapons to eradicate vegetation. But every development presented new difficulties. Equipment overheated in the humid air, their heavy machinery slowed down, and advanced weapons unexpectedly jammed. The people responsible for the attack stayed hidden on the soft, damp earth. They had unrivaled topographical knowledge and boundless patience. They didn't depend on brute force for everything. Was intentional, with each strike planned to minimize exposure and maximize impact. With its thick undergrowth and tumultuous ecosystem, the jungle served as their ally. The alien troops started to feel the pressure of their surroundings, and even the slightest rustle made it difficult to sleep. Of leaves caused waves of fear to sweep through their ranks, leaving men who had been prepared for open combat completely unprepared for this unseen conflict. Supplies ran out more quickly than expected, and communication cables, once as the tension grew greater, robust, became unreliable, as if the air itself carried a static that interfered with their signals. Commanders gave instructions to speed up resource extraction since they thought it would surpass the invisible resistance. However, their desperation only made their errors worse. Clearance crews were left alone, and their machines were ambushed. When left alone, they were disassembled piece by piece. their parts dispersed in ways that were inexplicable. The jungle, which had appeared so passive when they first arrived, but now the aliens felt alive, mocked its emptiness and started to perceive it as a predator that hunted them in ways they couldn't understand. This unrelenting resistance for a pattern or vulnerability, but each attempt at adaptation was greeted with a countermeasure. They hadn't expected that the invasion's leaders would continue to maintain their dominance and beliefs, directed the use of more powerful weapons that may level whole areas of the forest as part of their plan. Was straightforward. If they were unable to locate their adversary, they would demolish everything until there was nothing left to conceal. When the plan was implemented, terrible things happened. Huge explosions broke out. Within minutes, destroying acres of trees in the bush, the alien soldiers observed the devastation with a certain grim satisfaction. They had outwitted their crafty adversaries, but as the smoke cleared, their victory was for a little moment. The jungle seemed unyielding, as though it had taken the attack without noticing the traps. As the days went by, the ambushes and disappearances persisted relentlessly. For weeks, the aliens had to confront the harsh truth that their once confident and unopposed were being wiped off, and the woodlands, far from being deserted, appeared to harbor a power they couldn't see or anticipate, and they had no fear or exhaustion from the aliens. All of their technological power started to realize how big of a mistake they had made. They hadn't broken into an unprotected. The first indications of resistance appeared subtly as they entered a forest and found themselves the target on a battlefield. Alien patrols, assured of their supremacy, advanced farther into the forest before vanishing completely. At first, these losses were written off as oddities caused by untrained wildlife or issues with their tracking apparatus. However, as the number of events rose, alien commanders realized that something or someone was not an accident, was precisely aiming for them, and the attack started to become more purposeful, including small groups of extraterrestrial soldiers, discovered themselves isolated from reinforcements and encircled by cleverly disguised enemy traps, made their advanced equipment ineffective since explosions would appear out of nowhere, destroying drones and automobiles in a matter of seconds. And survivors reported attackers who blended in perfectly with the alien technology made for open warfare made it impossible to tell the jungle from their surroundings. Urban warfare did not work in the crowded, unpredictably changing setting. The subtle signs that the human left behind were not detectable by scanners or motion detectors. Every interaction appeared to follow a pattern: swift, silent blows that gave no opportunity for retaliation. Aliens who were used to fighting with physical force were unprepared for the crafty and flexibility of their adversaries as the aliens started to suffer more casualties. Reinforcements were summoned in, and their bases were strengthened with heavier materials in order to take the danger more seriously. Defenses. Despite these precautions, sophisticated surveillance technology was used to track the movements of the forest. Patrols continued to disappear, attacks continued, vehicles were sabotaged, and humans seemed to comprehend the alien tactics. When supply routes were surgically severed close to one another, they steered clear of direct conflict in favor of a war of attrition. Impair the invaders' spirits and interfere with their activities without putting them in needless danger. Despite their technological advantage, the aliens were gradually being outmaneuvered, so leaders retaliated by deploying specialized units with highly armed drones and state-of-the-art tracking devices were assigned to identifying and eliminating the human opposition. But the humans quickly adjusted and made use of the jungle itself as a weapon, altering the landscape to make the extraterrestrial forces' seemingly obvious routes unclear and confusing. Would abruptly result in dead ends, and natural barriers like cliffs and rivers were used to block extraterrestrial advances. As the aliens advanced, humanity took use of every advantage the jungle provided to turn it into an impenetrable fortress. Battled to obtain the upper hand. Their annoyance pushed them to develop weapons, were not equipped to handle the precision needed to counter such elusive enemies' attempts to use large-scale destruction. Humans operated in tiny areas, and attempts to clear broad areas of the forest by aerial strikes were not very successful. Mobile troops are constantly one step ahead of the psychological reaction of the aliens. The alien soldiers suffered severe injuries since they were accustomed to using superior firepower to defeat their adversaries. Every step into the bush seemed like stepping into a trap since they were outmatched by an enemy they couldn't see. Every sound became a potential threat as the canopy obscured their view, causing them to become tired and start to become paranoid. Desperate to reclaim power, the alien leadership further undermined their efficacy by increasing their reliance on drones equipped with automated technologies were set up to patrol the jungle and look for any indications of human activity. The machines were quick, unrelenting, and able to cover a lot of ground, while still they were rendered worthless ambushes by human ingenuity traps that were intended to target the drone sensors. Destroyed them before they could transmit any useful information, and as the days stretched into weeks, the aliens were confronted with a sobering truth. Each defeat further demoralized their men as their forces were being overextended and their supplies were running low. The humans stayed out of sight, maintaining the aliens' unwavering trust. Started to falter they had misjudged their adversaries, and now they were suffering the price. The human approach turned into they became more daring and started attacking the aliens' infrastructure, its communication centers and supply depots. These operations were carried out with such accuracy that by the time reinforcements arrived, the aliens were frantically trying to react. Humans had already disappeared, leaving only devastation in their wake. When commanders got together to review their plan, they realized that their existing approaches were not working and suggested a novel strategy to eradicate mankind by destroying the forest. The deployment of enormous deforestation machines that could level large areas of jungle in a matter of hours was an act of desperation motivated by despair and the incapacity of humans to adapt. They launched preemptive strikes on the machines because they foresaw this escalation and modified their strategy accordingly. In certain instances, they employed the aliens' own equipment to disable them before they could do serious harm. They are booby-trapping their cars at every turn and destroying their fuel sources. When the aliens counted Ed, the jungle responded at least as well. Inherently appeared to work against the invaders, yet humans were able to traverse because of their deep familiarity with the landscape. While the aliens were stuck in a state of uncertainty, the troops did it with ease. Reported odd incidents, such as equipment breaking down without warning or entire squads being lost in spite of. Because of their sophisticated navigational systems, humans transformed the jungle into a living, breathing environment that actively functioned. Patrols were lowered to combat the alien occupation once the invaders' casualties proved unsustainable, prevent more deaths, and bases were always on high alert. Even thus, mankind discovered methods to get past their defenses, and supplies that were designed to the humans took advantage of the alien warriors once they were intercepted, leaving them exposed to tiredness and starvation. Alien morale fell as a result of weakness driving the aliens closer to the edge. Once proud and unafraid, troops were now plagued by human doubt stories. Cleverness and their capacity to attack from the shadows, which sowed doubt and terror among leaders battled to keep the peace, but even their power was threatened by the people's mounting sense of despair. They persisted in their campaign with unwavering resolve and showed no compassion. Indication of weakness, the humans reacted to each alien maneuver with measured precision. The jungle once viewed as a resource to be exploited, it has turned into a battlefield where humans were consistently outmatched by aliens. The warriors that resisted the invasion were not your typical troops, rather. They were the result of years of perfected strategies, and elite jungle forces were experts of rigorous training created for environments just like these. Each member's psychological operations and survivability in guerrilla warfare were hand-selected and honed by demanding regimens emphasizing discipline and flexibility. By employing nature as a weapon, their knowledge enabled them to transform one of the most inhospitable environments on Earth into their ultimate allies. Strategy was based on accuracy and effectiveness, yet they didn't participate in drawn-out conflicts or careless acts of violence, rather. They were experts in swift, decisive action. Every strike was intended to destabilize the opponent by disrupting communication links, cutting off supplies, or destroying their unrivaled capacity to function covertly, and their travels through even advanced alien technology was unable to track them, since the jungle was so smooth. Their training highlighted the significance of knowing the environment better than their adversaries. They were intimately familiar with the jungle's flora and fauna. This understanding went beyond navigation to include animal and weather patterns. They were adept at using the environment to their advantage by laying traps that blended natural barriers or blending in seamlessly with the surroundings to direct the aliens into training ambush zones, turned the jungle's unpredictably chaotic mess into a weapon that was meticulously controlled, demonstrating the human resilience that they learned to persevere not just from their physical training, but also from their psychological readiness. The psychological toll of extended seclusion and high-stakes operations, in contrast to their alien humans, thrived on uncertainty, while foes who relied on advanced equipment and organized hierarchies, their skill in improvising, was their ability to adjust to shifting conditions. Taking advantage of even the aliens, used to simple warfare, found it difficult to counter the humans' even the simplest errors. Unconventional strategy, they relied on technological superiority and overwhelming force, but neither was successful against an adversary they couldn't see or anticipate because the aliens followed strict routine, which people took advantage of whenever possible. For instance, they expected that after an attack, the aliens would bolster certain regions, and they would exploit this predictability to stage diversionary attacks that divert resources from vital areas. The resistance had a significant effect on alien soldiers who had been assured in every step they took through the jungle felt like an invitation to their initial mission, which was now fraught with doubt. Catastrophe. Humans had become experts at using fear to wage psychological warfare. Using uncertainty to debilitate their adversaries, even the most minor confrontations left enduring wounds as the extraterrestrials recognized they were the resistance wasn't ever really safe, not even inside their fortified bases, simply for survival, but also to convey a message that people were aware that their behavior would be closely examined by the alien leadership, and they took advantage of this by destroying alien activities with few resources. They proved their mettle and made the invaders reconsider their presumptions about Earth that every victory, no matter how minor, helped to undermine the invaders' sense of power. But the humans also understood that more than simply strategy and approach, they mainly depended on their capacity to function as a single cohesive team. Each team member had a distinct task to perform, and they coordinated flawlessly, communicating through signal that the aliens couldn't detect, guaranteeing that their whereabouts would remain a mystery at this degree of even in the most chaotic situations. Synchronization enabled them to precisely carry out intricate procedures. When confronted with advanced extraterrestrial technology, their capacity for innovation was yet another crucial component. Didn't try to match it exactly. Instead, they came up with alternatives using their imagination and ingenuity. Answers: they turned the invaders' own tools against them by repurposing alien technologies. For instance, they repurposed alien materials to make makeshift weapons or repurposed captured drones to collect intelligence. They evened the playing field and gained the upper hand thanks to their inventive use of explosives. The opposition was fueled by a strong feeling of duty. They were not merely soldiers, they were home guardians, defendi. What they most importantly, this emotional drive offered them a competitive advantage over the aliens who planned the invasion. Every victory held the weight of something far bigger than the operation that humanity couldn't duplicate. As the resistance increased, they were fighting for their future in addition to their immediate survival. More efficient, it became evident that people were actively influencing the invasion rather than just responding to it. Throughout the battle, their actions were not haphazard acts of rebellion, but rather meticulously orchestrated operations intended to attain long-term objectives. They focused on critical weaknesses in the alien infrastructure, compelling the invaders to redirect resources and reconsider their tactics. Humans governed the conflict's pace, determining when, and despite their advanced technology, the aliens were sluggish to adjust to the areas where confrontations would take place. They were exposed to the human dynamic approach because they relied on inflexible procedures and hierarchical decision-making. The humans had already switched to a new strategy by the time the aliens responded to the first one. The invaders were kept off balance and prevented from ever regaining complete control of the humans' greatest power in this situation was their capacity to stay inconspicuous. They worked in the background, leaving only the devastation they inflicted as evidence of their existence. Both physical and psychological invisibility prevented the aliens from seeing or comprehending them. Couldn't anticipate their next move. This ignorance gave the opposition a sense of invincibility. The resistance faced difficulties in operating in such a hostile environment, which further demoralized the alien forces. The environment demanded that humans be vigilant and resilient at all times. The psychological effects of protracted fighting as well as the physical perils of the jungle, they had to walk a tightrope between assertiveness and restraint, making sure that their acts had an effect without putting them in danger. Needless AR hazards, but they persisted in spite of these obstacles. Their triumph, motivated by their will to defend their home, was evidence of the strength of human ingenuity, and humans' ability to adapt allowed them to transform one of the planet's oldest habitats into a contemporary battlefield, utilizing all of its advantages to defeat a technologically superior adversary. Their capacity to combine tradition with. They were able to outmaneuver the invaders at every turn because to their inventiveness, and they started to change as the humans go from defensive maneuverings to a concerted attack. Their plan was accurate and intentional, focusing on the flaws they had found in the alien operations. By hitting key targets, they compelled the invaders to adopt a reactive stance, thus destroying their ability to maintain the occupation. Each attack was planned to maximize its effects on the surrounding area. Humans concentrated on the alien supply chain and overall infrastructure, realizing that continuous logistics were essential to the invaders' sophisticated technology. Due to the disruption of supply routes, alien convoys had to detour via increasingly hazardous places where humans were present. Foreseeing these changes, traps and ambushes were prepared along alternate routes. By methodically focusing on food, fuel, and vital supplies caused a chain reaction that reduced the aliens' ability to operate. Another significant weakness that the humans took advantage of was communication. As the extraterrestrial forces' reliance on advance, they interfered with networks to coordinate their operations by using electronic interference and sabotage communication lines, causing the invaders to become isolated and unable to plan their reactions efficiently. Because of this remoteness, alien bases were frequently left in the dark and unable to transmit distress signals or receive current commands, increased the invaders' perception of their weakness, and left them open to additional alien defensive attacks. The invaders tried to strengthen their locations, but their techniques were futile against the humans' changing tactics, constructing strongly fortified bases to protect their foothold. But these structures turned into immovable targets for the people who utilized their understanding of the area to get beyond traditional defenses. By taking advantage of the environments due to their inherent characteristics, they were able to launch tiny, targeted attacks on even the most heavily fortified positions, made these strongholds more and more untenable, and the human command system was another important element in their decentralized strategy, enabled quick decision-making and flexibility, guaranteeing that no field commanders were given the authority to act independently, utilizing their personal knowledge, because a single loss would upset the broader plan. This adaptability stood in stark contrast to the ability to make tactical decisions based on knowledge of the environment and the enemy. The IC system, the aliens' hierarchical structure, found it difficult to adapt to the resistance's dynamic nature as the offensive gathered steam. The humans turned their attention to the alien bases, which they launched attacks against. Attacks to take down vital infrastructure and the power system's weapon depot. Attacks were well-planned operations intended to maximize the aliens' capabilities rather than haphazard acts of sabotage. In order to maintain their presence by making bases unusable, the humans compelled the invaders leaving their key positions, significantly weakens their hold on the jungle. Another essential component of the offensive that the humans realized the aliens were using was psychological pressure. Already discouraged by their failure to find the barrier or successfully increase the intensity to fight it, and regularity of assaults, they increased the invaders' feeling of unease. Soldiers who were already worn out from being on guard all the time started to falter under the strain of desertion, and despite the overwhelming obstacles, internal decline within the alien ranks grew, further undermining their cohesiveness. The humans remained focused and disciplined, making sure they didn't overextend their resources, that every activity was viable and in line with their long-term goals. They prevented needless risks from occurring. This strategic technique maximized the harm while minimizing their personal losses only when the odds were in their favor. Imposed on the invaders, alien commanders, as their losses increased, tried to use advanced technologies, such as automated drones and heavily armed vehicles, to reclaim the initiative, and monitoring measures were implemented to overcome the opposition, but people adjusted. They quickly discovered methods to eliminate these new dangers by repurposing alien technology that transforms confiscated equipment into instruments for its own purposes. They further weakened the aliens' technological advantage by using the invaders' assets against them. Attempts to intensify their response only make their situation worse. Extensive operations to eliminate the opposition frequently backfired, since humans took advantage of these chances to attack alien forces withdrawing and exposed flanks. Heavy machinery and strict procedures prevented them from matching human movement and flexibility. Each unsuccessful operation depleted their resources and spirits, bringing them one step closer to defeating the humans. Also took advantage of the alien occupation's increasing environmental effects and the delicate equilibrium of the jungle had been upset by resource extraction, making even their sophisticated technologies difficult to use. Couldn't deal with the people who took advantage of these difficulties by utilizing the environmental harm caused by the invader to further attack alien equipment and infrastructure that was essential to reducing these problems in order to make their operations more difficult. As the onslaught went on, they compelled the invaders to use more resources to deal with the fallout. Humans were able to predict the aliens' reactions with remarkable accuracy, staying one step ahead of them. Employing deception and diversionary strategies to trick the invaders with misleading signals, spoof attacks, and cautious planted evidence, diverted extraterrestrial forces from their intended objectives. And the alien command structure is confused and frustrated, which leaves them open to abuse. Unquestionably, the human strategy's cumulative effect resulted in alien losses that kept mount, and their capacity to maintain the occupation diminished daily. Communication networks and supply systems were cut off, and bases were abandoned. When the invaders, who had previously been sure of their supremacy, suddenly confronted an adversary they were unable to anticipate or manage their attempts to reclaim the upper hand, which were continuously blocked by the human offensive demonstrated superior battlefield knowledge and was not just a display of tactical brilliance, but also evidence of their fortitude and tenacity in the face of a technologically superior adversary. They had changed the course of the war with their sheer resourcefulness and flexibility. The forest had become a bastion that the aliens could not penetrate due to their abilities to outmaneuver and outthink the invaders. Longer penetrate the invaders, who were previously certain that they could conquer Earth, were now engaged in a losing conflict. Against a foe they had greatly underestimated, the resistance's last stage brought the result of human cunning and perseverance have allowed the jungle forces to effectively demolish a large portion of the extraterrestrial infrastructure and turned their attention to striking with force evict the invaders entirely. The once confident aliens now confronted the terrible truth of an unwinnable war. Their technology was ahead of the curve, and shown to be inadequate in the face of their human foes' inventiveness, flexibility, and relentless tactics. Because humans knew how important it was to keep moving forward, every activity in this phase was carefully designed to make sure that alien supply lines were destroyed in addition to being disrupted for maximum impact. With reinforcements unable to reach vital areas, the invaders are left alone and growing more desperate. The humans stepped up their assaults on alien bases, demolishing the aliens and attacking each one individually. Humans provided the logistical backbone, forcing the remaining forces into progressively defensive positions. The coordinated rather than overpowering their targets, strikes against extraterrestrial bases were distinguished by surgical precision.
With brute force, the humans took advantage of the aliens' vulnerabilities by using their in-depth knowledge of the area. Each attack on defenses targeted vital systems, power sources, weapon stores, and these strategic actions by command centers rendered the alien strongholds unusable. Every base that fell, forcing the invaders to flee important areas, significantly reduced the aliens' ability to resist. The resistance took advantage of the disarray within the alien ranks to boost morale among the troops. Hit a record low. Made worse by fatigue, running out of supplies, and the alien leaders found it difficult to keep their forces under control due to the constant strain of human attacks. Increasing losses. The psychological toll of ongoing failure and uncertainty, the invaders' vulnerability and fragmentation prevented them from launching a coordinated counteroffensive as humans pressed their benefit of stepping up the frequency and escalation of their activities by planning concurrent attacks in several areas. They overextended the alien forces, making them incapable of effectively defend any one site. This attrition-based tactic hastened.
Humans showed their mastery of asymmetric warfare by utilizing the collapse of the invader operating capabilities. Restricted resources to produce achievements that are disproportionately important. The alien leadership is desperate to rescue the situation. A final escalation attempt was made, advanced weapons, and in a final attempt to regain control, reinforcements were sent in. But the humans took advantage of the aliens' reliance on them by anticipating these actions and modifying their strategy accordingly. Unpredictable tactics that lure them into traps and use precision attacks to thwart their progress efforts to recover control merely accelerated their downfall. The invasion's environmental cost also had a major impact on the aliens' demise because of their aggressive resource mining and large machinery. Inflicted extensive harm to the jungle, making it logistically difficult for them to defeat humans. Took advantage of these flaws and used the disturbed surroundings to further obstruct the aliens' movements by hitting. They compelled the aliens to devote resources to restoration efforts at crucial junctures in environmental deterioration. Apart from the growing opposition, the result of these endeavors was the total breakdown of the aliens' determination to combat the human strategy based on accuracy, patience, and the invaders' lack of adaptation prevented them from moving forward. Alien commanders, once incredibly self-assured, they were forced to face the truth of their failure, which they had miscalculated. the tenacity and resourcefulness of their opponents, an error that proved disastrous in the latter phases of despite opposition, the humans consolidated their triumph by methodically removing the last of the alien
presence. Now dispersed and disorganized, the invaders were unable to mount any significant in order to prevent any traces of the extraterrestrial troops from gathering. The humans concentrated on protecting the jungle. This stage was carried out with the same efficiency and discipline that had defined the resistance as a whole. The aliens' ejection was not only a military triumph, but also a symbolic one, proving the strength of despite their apparent insurmountable obstacles, the invaders demonstrated human ingenuity and determination. An adversary that recognized the benefits of flexibility, unity, and technological dominance had vanquished. In addition to protecting their land, the humans' inventiveness conveyed a strong message. Earth was not a place to be taken lightly, and the conflict's aftermath demonstrated how resilient people can be. Once viewed as a battlefield, Spirit the Jungle has come to represent human resilience and victory. Knew they had protected something bigger than themselves when they returned to their life after serving in the resistance. Their triumph demonstrated their unwavering resolve and their capacity to transform even the most trying situations into their later. The beaten and humiliated extraterrestrial armies left Earth.
Their withdrawal, which left the remains of their abortive invasion behind, signaled the end of the war, but also served the aliens once served as a sobering reminder of the price of undervaluing humanity. So convinced of their supremacy that they had discovered the hard way that power by itself was insufficient to guarantee victory. After achieving their goal, the jungle forces vanished as silently as they had appeared. And their operations would continue to legends subject is proof of the strength of strategy unity, and the human resolve to endure the lessons of the resistance would persist in influencing how humanity views conflict and the value of fortitude in the face of hardship. The battle had a long-lasting effect on the alien invaders as well as the
failure of their invasion would serve as a warning about HFY and its perils, reverberating throughout their dominion. Of underestimating a resolute adversary that was previously written off as unimportant had turned out to be much more powerful than they had anticipated, and the jungle win wasn't merely a moment of victory, but also a proclamation of humanity's resilience and fortitude, serving as a reminder that even the human spirit could triumph over the aliens despite the tremendous odds, because brute force had not vanquished their technology and power, but rather ingenuity, discipline, and the unwavering determination of people who are unwilling to give up.